We're also following this breaking news. The longtime chief financial officer of the Trump Organization has a plea deal in his New York tax fraud case.
That's right. Allen Weisselberg has been convicted on 15 counts of fraud and tax evasion. The former CFO took more than $1.7 million in off-the-book compensation from the Trump Organization. He is expected to serve about 5 months in prison and pay $2 million in fines. Weisselberg will also be compelled to testify in the trial against the Trump Organization later this year.
CBS News contributor Rebecca Roiphe joins us now for more on this, the news breaking this morning. Rebecca, prosecutors are asking for a sentence of 5 months in prison because he pleaded guilty to 15 felony counts. What was the other alternative? And for folks who may not be familiar with these types of cases, is this typical?
So Weisselberg could have gone to trial and he would have faced a much stiffer sentence, somewhere closer to several years, 5 years. I think that the span was 5 to 15 years. And so he got a relatively good deal out of this plea agreement. Now, of course, he had to agree not only that, to admit to having committed these crimes, but also that he would cooperate against Trump Organization and Trump's payroll company. And that's significant. So he's getting this discount essentially, both because he has agreed that he committed these crimes and because he has agreed to cooperate with the prosecutors in this further investigation. This is fairly typical in a case like this, where a defendant will get a significantly lower sentence for pleading guilty, and in this case, for also agreeing to cooperate. Now, I think a lot of the public was looking to see if he would cooperate against the former president or one of the other members of his family, and he has not done that. And so it's interesting to see that he got this discount without having to agree to implicate the former president in this scheme.
So help us understand that a bit more, Rebecca. I mean, ultimately, how might this case then, with that agreement to cooperate, impact any future investigations into former President Trump and the Trump Organization?
Well, this is significant for the Trump Organization because if Weisselberg had not agreed to cooperate, then whether or not they could have obtained a conviction in that case is somewhat up in the air, because they would have had to either get the company to plead guilty or gone to trial and prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the company was guilty. Now, companies can't really act except through their officials, and to have such a high up official in the organization admit to having done this, committed this conduct with the organization, is essentially makes it very hard for that organization to put forth any defense at all. So he has all but, and again, there's emphasis on all but, because nothing is assured in the criminal justice system that the organization itself will be convicted. And that can be seen as sometimes a sort of, we used to call a death sentence for corporations, because the fines and penalties can be so significant that it essentially forces dissolution. And that's a serious consequence for the former president. Now, in terms of further investigations, I think that it's a lot harder to predict what exactly this means for those other investigations. As we know, there are 2 investigations, a parallel civil and criminal investigation into the former president and whether or not he and his companies significantly manipulated the value of his assets in order to gain an advantage with certain regulators. Now, these are factually very distinct, but may involve some of the same players. So it's unclear whether or not Weisselberg will be willing to help in any way on those other investigations, or even has information regarding those other investigations.
Yeah, I think the judge does have discretion if they find that he's not being forthcoming in future testimony to extend his sentence. So perhaps that will be a factor as well. Rebecca Roiphe, thank you very much.
Thank you.